They said she looked like a librarian who'd taken a wrong turn at the recruitment office. Maya Shun stood barely 5 feet 3 inches tall, her wire-rimmed glasses reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights of Randolph Air Force Base, while other cadets strutted across the tarmac in pristine flight suits adorned with patches from prestigious universities and legacy military families. Maya wore standard-issue everything. Her boots were regulation but worn, her flight bag carried no designer labels, and her shoulders bore no family tradition of wings earned in distant wars. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun painted the Texas airfield in shades of amber and gold as Maya stepped off the transport bus that had carried her from the civilian terminal. Unlike the convoy of black SUVs that had delivered her classmates, she had taken public transportation, her single duffel bag containing everything she owned. The other cadets emerged from air-conditioned luxury vehicles, their families taking photographs and offering last-minute advice. Maya's parents had said goodbye at a bus station 3 states away, her mother pressing a small jade pendant into her palm and whispering words in Mandarin that roughly translated to "fly with honor." The advanced pilot training program at Randolph represented the pinnacle of military aviation education. Only the top 2% of officer candidates earned slots, and even fewer survived the rigorous selection process that would determine who flew what aircraft for the next decade of their service. Maya had arrived with test scores that should have guaranteed respect, but numbers on paper meant nothing when measured against the unspoken hierarchies that governed military culture. Captain Jessica Morrison noticed Maya immediately, though. Not for reasons that would benefit the young woman. Morrison commanded the training squadron with the efficiency of someone who had clawed her way up through ranks that rarely welcomed female pilots. She had earned her position through exceptional skill and political maneuvering, but her success had come at the cost of empathy for those who struggled against the same barriers she had once faced. To Morrison, Maya represented everything weak about the modern military's diversity initiatives. "Chun," Morrison called out during the first formation, her voice carrying across the assembled group of 32 cadets. "Step forward." Maya moved with precise military bearing, her chin level and eyes focused straight ahead. The other cadets shifted slightly, sensing the beginning of what would become a familiar ritual. Morrison circled her slowly, taking in every detail of Maya's appearance with theatrical scrutiny. "Tell me, Chun, what makes you think you belong here?" Morrison's question hung in the humid Texas air like a challenge. Maya had prepared for this moment during countless hours of mental rehearsal. "Ma'am, I graduated summa cum laude from the Air Force Academy with a degree in aerospace engineering. I scored in the 98th percentile on all flight aptitude tests and hold a private pilot's license with instrument rating." Morrison's smile was sharp as a blade. "Impressive credentials. But can you handle 8 Gs of force when you're pulling out of a dive at 500 feet? Can you make split-second decisions when surface-to-air missiles are tracking your aircraft? Can you lead a flight of heavily armed fighters into hostile territory?" The questions were rhetorical, designed to plant seeds of doubt rather than elicit answers. Maya understood this but responded anyway. "Ma'am, I intend to find out." "We'll see about that," Morrison replied, her tone suggesting she had already reached her own conclusion. The dormitory assignment process revealed the first layer of the social stratification that would define Maya's experience. While most cadets were housed in modern barracks with private rooms and shared common areas, Maya found herself assigned to Building C, a converted structure that had once served as temporary housing for visiting personnel. Her room was half the size of standard quarters, with a window that faced the aircraft maintenance facility rather than the flight line. Her roommate was Rebecca Martinez, a soft-spoken woman from New Mexico whose father had flown F-16s during the Gulf War. Rebecca possessed the easy confidence that came from growing up in a military family, but she also carried the burden of living up to a legacy that had been built by someone else. She greeted Maya with cautious friendliness, understanding that alliances formed quickly in environments where individual survival often depended on group acceptance. "I heard Morrison has it out for you already," Rebecca said as she helped Maya arrange her few belongings in the cramped space. "She's tough on everyone, but she seems to have a special interest in making your life difficult." Maya unpacked her books, carefully placing her advanced aerodynamics textbooks alongside volumes on military history and strategy. "I expected challenges. I didn't expect them to be personal." "Everything's personal here," Rebecca replied. "The question is whether you're going to let it break you or make you stronger." The academic portion of the program began with ground school, where cadets learned the theoretical foundations of advanced military aviation. Maya excelled in every subject, her engineering background providing a solid foundation for understanding complex aerodynamic principles and weapon systems. She absorbed information about aircraft performance, navigation systems, and tactical doctrine with the intensity of someone who knew that knowledge would be her primary weapon in the battles to come. Her classmates noticed her academic performance, but interpreted it through the lens of their own prejudices. Thomas Bradley, heir to a family fortune built on defense contracts, dismissed her achievements as the product of great inflation and diversity quotas. "She's probably never even seen a real fighter jet up close," he confided to his circle of friends during a break between classes. "Book learning can't teach you how to fly." Sarah Williams, whose grandfather had commanded a bomber wing during World War II, viewed Maya as a threat to her own position near the top of the class rankings. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "She's trying too hard," Sarah whispered to anyone who would listen. "Real pilots don't need to prove themselves with perfect test scores." The whispers and sideways glances created an atmosphere of isolation that followed Maya through every aspect of her training. She ate meals alone, studied in empty classrooms, and walked to formation by herself while her classmates formed social groups that would support them through the challenges ahead. The exclusion was not overtly cruel, but it was comprehensive, and effectively communicated that she was not welcome in the informal networks that often determine success in competitive environments. Maya's first flight evaluation took place on a Tuesday morning when the Texas heat had already begun to shimmer off the runway despite the early hour. She had spent the previous evening reviewing emergency procedures and aircraft specifications, her preparation meticulous and thorough. The T-38 Talon trainer aircraft sat on the flight line like a sleek white arrow, its twin engines designed to introduce student pilots to the performance characteristics of modern military jets. Captain Robert Hayes would serve as her instructor pilot for the evaluation flight. Hayes was a veteran of multiple combat deployments, his flight suit adorned with patches that told the story of missions flown in contested airspace over 3 different continents. He had a reputation for fairness tempered by extremely high standards, and his recommendations carried significant weight in determining student advancement through the program. "Chun, you're flying from the front seat today," Hayes announced as they completed the pre-flight inspection. "I want to see what you can do when you're actually controlling the aircraft." Maya strapped herself into the cockpit with practiced efficiency, her hands moving through the startup checklist with deliberate precision. The T-38 systems came online one by one, each indicator light and gauge reading exactly as her training had taught her to expect. She requested clearance from the tower and taxied toward the active runway, her inputs to the controls smooth and measured. The takeoff was textbook perfect, Maya's timing on the rotation and initial climb rate earning an approving nod from Hayes. She established the aircraft in a steep climb, following the predetermined profile that would take them to the training area where the real evaluation would begin. The Texas countryside spread out below them, a patchwork of farmland and small towns that looked increasingly miniature as they gained altitude. "All right, Chun, let's see what you've got," Hayes said through the intercom. "I want you to demonstrate a tactical approach to target acquisition. Descend to 2,000 feet and execute a simulated attack run on the water tower at your 10 o'clock position." Maya pushed the stick forward, initiating a controlled descent that would position her aircraft for the simulated attack. She rolled into a 30-degree bank, adjusting her heading to align with the target while maintaining appropriate airspeed for the maneuver. The water tower grew larger in her windscreen as she refined her approach, her calculations accounting for wind drift and optimal weapon delivery parameters. "Good lineup," Hayes observed. "Now show me your recovery." Maya pulled back on the stick, adding power as she climbed away from the simulated target. The G-forces pressed her into her seat, but she maintained control inputs that kept the aircraft stable throughout the maneuver. She leveled off at the assigned altitude and turned toward the next waypoint, her navigation precise and her communication with air traffic control professional. The evaluation continued for another hour, Hayes calling for demonstrations of various aerobatic maneuvers, emergency procedures, and formation flying techniques. Maya executed each task with competence that bordered on perfection, her performance revealing the countless hours of study and preparation that had preceded this moment. "Not bad, Chen," He said as they returned to base. "You've got good hands and a solid understanding of the fundamentals. But flying by the book will only take you so far. Combat aviation requires instincts that can't be taught in a classroom." Maya acknowledged the feedback without defensiveness, understanding that Hayes was offering genuine insight rather than criticism. She landed the aircraft with the same precision she had displayed throughout the flight, her touchdown smooth and her rollout exactly centered on the runway. The debriefing took place in Hayes's office, a cramped space filled with aviation manuals, flight charts, and photographs from various deployments. Maya sat across from his desk, her notepad ready to record the feedback that would shape her understanding of her own performance. "You flew well today," Hayes began, his tone suggesting that praise from him was not easily earned. "Your technical skills are solid, and your preparation is obvious. But I'm concerned about your situational awareness during the tactical portions of the flight." Maya looked up from her notepad, her expression attentive. "Sir, could you be more specific?" "You flew every maneuver like you were taking a check ride," Hayes explained. "Perfect execution, but no creativity. No adaptation to changing circumstances. Real combat doesn't follow predetermined profiles. You need to learn to think outside the parameters you've memorized." The feedback was valuable, but Maya understood that it would be interpreted differently by those who were looking for reasons to question her suitability for the program. Word of her performance would spread through the informal networks that connected instructors, administrators, and students, and every detail would be analyzed through the lens of existing prejudices. Captain Morrison received Hayes's written evaluation later that afternoon, her review of the document confirming suspicions she had harbored since Maya's arrival. The technical ratings were strong, but the comments about rigid adherence to procedures and lack of tactical flexibility provided ammunition for the campaign she was already planning. "Hayes thinks she's too mechanical," Morrison told her deputy during their weekly review of student progress. "Good technique, but no killer instinct. She flies like an engineer, not a warrior." The deputy, a major who had learned to interpret Morrison's opinions as guidance for his own assessments, nodded in agreement. "Should we recommend her for transport aircraft? She might do well flying cargo planes." Morrison's smile was predatory. "Let's see how she handles some real pressure first. I want to know what she's made of before we make any permanent decisions about her future." The pressure Morrison had in mind began to manifest in subtle ways over the following weeks. Maya's flight schedule was adjusted to include more challenging sorties, often with weather conditions that pushed the boundaries of safe training operations. Her academic examinations were scrutinized more carefully than those of her peers, with minor errors receiving disproportionate attention and commentary. The social isolation intensified as well, with Maya finding herself excluded from study groups and informal gatherings where students shared information about upcoming evaluations and instructor preferences. The exclusion was never explicitly acknowledged, but invitations were not extended, and conversations ceased when she approached groups of her classmates. Maya adapted to these challenges with the same methodical approach she applied to academic study. She created her own study materials, developed alternative sources of information about program requirements, and maintained her physical fitness. Through solitary training sessions that began before dawn and continued after her classmates had finished their evening activities, her performance in the cockpit remained strong, but the constant scrutiny and isolation began to take their toll. She made small mistakes that would have been overlooked in other students, but each error was documented and analyzed as evidence of her unsuitability for advanced training. The feedback she received became increasingly harsh, with instructors questioning not just her technical performance, but her fundamental aptitude for military aviation. The breaking point came during a formation flying exercise in the 4th week of training. Maya was assigned to fly as wingman to Thomas Bradley, the defense contractor's son, who had made no secret of his disdain for her presence in the program. The mission called for a 4-ship formation to practice tactical approaches and coordinated maneuvers, with Bradley serving as flight lead for their 2-aircraft element. Maya positioned her aircraft in the standard wingman formation, maintaining proper spacing and alignment as they climbed toward the training area. Bradley's radio calls were professional but curt, his instructions delivered with the assumption that Maya would struggle to maintain formation discipline under the stress of complex maneuvering. 2. Prepare for tactical descent, Bradley announced. As they reached the assigned altitude, follow my lead and try to keep up. Maya acknowledged the transmission and prepared for the maneuver, her aircraft ready to follow Bradley's lead through the planned sequence of turns and altitude changes. Bradley rolled into a steep bank, initiating a spiral descent that would test Maya's ability to maintain formation while managing the increasing G-forces and spatial disorientation that accompanied such aggressive maneuvering. Maya stayed in position, her aircraft maintaining proper spacing despite the challenging flight profile. She anticipated Bradley's next move, adjusting her power settings and control inputs to match his energy management and maintain formation integrity. The maneuver was well within her capabilities, but Bradley seemed determined to find her limits. 2. You're lagging behind, Bradley called out, his voice carrying a note of frustration. Close it up or abort the maneuver. Maya checked her position relative to Bradley's aircraft, confirming that her spacing was within acceptable parameters. She made minor adjustments to her position, but did not deviate from the formation standards that had been drilled into every student pilot. Her aircraft remained properly positioned, neither too close nor too far from Bradley's jet. Lead 2 is in position, Maya replied, her voice steady despite the increasing tension in the cockpit. Bradley's response came in the form of an even more aggressive maneuver, a climbing turn that combined maximum G-forces with rapid heading changes. Maya followed without hesitation, her aircraft tracking Bradley's movements with precision that demonstrated both skill and determination. She was flying at the edge of her capabilities, but she was flying within the bounds of safety and formation doctrine. The exercise continued for another 10 minutes, with Bradley attempting increasingly difficult maneuvers designed to break Maya's formation discipline. She responded to each challenge with competence that bordered on stubbornness, refusing to give ground even when the flying pushed beyond the parameters of standard training missions. Finally, Bradley's patience ran out. 2. You're not ready for this level of training, he announced over the radio. "I'm terminating the exercise." Maya wanted to protest, to point out that she had successfully completed every maneuver and maintained formation throughout the challenging flight profile. But radio discipline prevented her from arguing with the flight lead, and she acknowledged the termination with professional restraint. The debrief took place in front of the entire flight class, with Bradley presenting his version of events to an audience that included both students and instructors. According to his account, Maya had been unable to maintain formation discipline during complex maneuvering, her aircraft positioning erratic and her responses to radio calls delayed. "She's a hazard to herself and others," Bradley concluded, his tone suggesting reluctant professional judgment rather than personal animosity. "I can't recommend her for continuation in the program." Maya sat in silence as her classmates absorbed Bradley's assessment, their expressions ranging from sympathy to satisfaction, depending on their individual relationships with the protagonist of this public humiliation. She understood that defending herself would only confirm suspicions about her inability to accept criticism and work within the team structure that military aviation demanded. Captain Morrison witnessed the debrief with obvious satisfaction, her expression confirming that this outcome had been anticipated, if not actively orchestrated. She made notes in Maya's file, documenting Bradley's concerns and adding her own observations about Maya's suitability for advanced training. The formal review board convened the following week, with Maya facing a panel of senior officers who would determine her fate in the program. The hearing was conducted with military efficiency, presenting evidence and testimony that painted a picture of a student pilot who possessed technical skills but lacked the judgment and adaptability required for combat aviation. Morrison presented the case against Maya with prosecutorial precision, citing flight evaluation reports, instructor feedback, and peer assessments that collectively suggested a pattern of rigid thinking and poor situational awareness. The evidence was compelling when viewed through the lens of predetermined conclusions, each data point supporting a narrative of unsuitability that had been constructed over weeks of careful documentation. Maya was given an opportunity to respond to the charges, her defense limited to factual corrections and requests for clarification. She did not attempt to shift blame or make excuses, understanding that such tactics would only confirm suspicions about her character and judgment. Instead, she presented her own documentation of flight performance, academic achievement, and adherence to program standards. The board's decision was unanimous. Maya Chun was removed from the advanced pilot training program due to demonstrated deficiencies in tactical judgment and formation flying skills. She would be reassigned to a non-flying position within the Air Force. Her dreams of becoming a fighter pilot officially terminated. The announcement was made during the next morning's formation, with Morrison delivering the news in a tone that suggested institutional sadness rather than personal triumph. Maya's classmates received the information with expressions of surprise and concern, their reactions carefully calibrated to avoid any appearance of satisfaction or relief. Maya packed her belongings that afternoon, her few possessions fitting easily into the same duffel bag that had carried them to Randolph just 5 weeks earlier. Rebecca Martinez offered to help, her assistance motivated by genuine friendship rather than social obligation. "This isn't the end," Rebecca said as they folded Maya's uniforms and arranged her books for transport. "There are other ways to serve, other ways to fly." Maya nodded, but her response was non-committal. She had invested everything in this opportunity, and its loss felt like a fundamental rejection of her identity and potential. The carefully constructed plans for her future had crumbled, leaving her to navigate an uncertain path forward. The bus ride to her new assignment took her through the same Texas landscape she had observed from the cockpit of the T-38, but the view from ground level felt different. The small towns and farmland that had looked peaceful from altitude now seemed confining, their horizons limited by the curvature of the Earth rather than the performance envelope of a high-performance aircraft. Maya's new assignment was to Randolph's Base Operations Center, where she would serve as a logistics officer responsible for coordinating aircraft maintenance schedules and parts inventory. The work was important to the overall mission, but it felt like exile to someone who had trained to fly rather than manage the flying of others. Her supervisor was Master Sergeant Patricia Collins, a career non-commissioned officer who had spent 20 years keeping military aircraft operational. Through a combination of technical expertise and administrative efficiency, Collins had seen many disappointed officer candidates pass through her organization, and she recognized the signs of someone struggling to adapt to unexpected circumstances. "I know this isn't what you wanted," Collins said during Maya's first day orientation. "But good logistics officers are just as important as good pilots. Maybe more important, because without us, nobody flies." Maya appreciated the sentiment, but she struggled to find meaning in work that felt disconnected from her core identity. She performed her duties with competence and dedication, but the passion that had driven her academic and flight training achievements was absent from her daily routine. Months passed in a blur of requisition forms, maintenance schedules, and inventory reports. Maya watched from her office window as T-38s took off and landed, their sleek forms reminding her of opportunities lost and dreams deferred. She maintained her physical fitness and continued studying aeronautical engineering in her spare time, but these activities felt like echoes of a life that had been taken from her. The isolation that had begun during flight training continued. In her new assignment, her fellow logistics officers were friendly but distant. Their conversations focused on administrative matters that held little interest for someone whose heart remained in the cockpit. Maya found herself working longer hours and taking on additional responsibilities, using activity as a buffer against the depression that threatened to overwhelm her. Her performance evaluations were consistently strong, with supervisors noting her attention to detail, technical knowledge, and willingness to exceed expectations. But Maya understood that excellence in logistics would never compensate for the failure that had ended her flying career. She had been marked as someone who couldn't meet the standards of military aviation, and that judgment would follow her throughout her service. The turning point came during a conversation with Major David Kim, a maintenance officer who had been grounded due to a medical condition that ended his flying career. Kim understood the psychological impact of being denied the opportunity to fly, and he recognized the signs of someone struggling with that loss. "I see you watching the flight line," Kim said during a quiet moment in the operations center. "I know what that feels like." Maya looked up from her computer screen, her expression cautious. "Sir, I was a pilot once too," Kim continued. "F-16s. Had to give it up when my vision deteriorated beyond correctable limits. I spent 2 years feeling sorry for myself before I realized that my knowledge and experience were still valuable, even if I couldn't use them in the cockpit." The conversation that followed was the first honest discussion Maya had experienced since her removal from flight training. Kim shared his own story of disappointment and adaptation, describing the process of finding new purpose and supporting the mission rather than executing it directly. "There are other ways to fly," Kim said, "other ways to serve. But you have to be willing to look beyond the narrow definition of success that got you here in the first place." Maya left that conversation with a sense of possibility that had been absent from her life for months. She began to explore options for continuing her aviation career through alternative paths, researching programs and opportunities that might allow her to return to flying in some capacity. The research led her to the A-10 Thunderbolt II, a close air support aircraft that operated under different performance parameters than the fighter she had originally hoped to fly. The A-10 was designed for low-altitude, high-threat environments where precision and survivability mattered more than speed and maneuverability. It was an aircraft that rewarded different skills and attracted pilots who were more interested in supporting ground troops than engaging in air-to-air combat. Maya learned that the A-10 community was less influenced by the social hierarchies that had defined her experience in advanced pilot training. The mission demanded pilots who could operate independently, make quick decisions under pressure, and maintain effectiveness in degraded conditions. These were qualities that aligned with her strengths, even if they hadn't been recognized during her previous training. The path back to flying would require persistence, political maneuvering, and a willingness to accept assignments that other officers might consider beneath their ambitions. Maya would need to rebuild her reputation, demonstrate her value through non-flying roles, and find mentors who could advocate for her return to the cockpit. But for the first time since her dismissal from flight training, Maya felt a sense of direction. She had been knocked down, humiliated, and written off by those who were supposed to evaluate her potential. Now she would have to prove that their judgment had been wrong, not through complaints or appeals, but through the kind of performance that would be impossible to ignore. The logistics office felt different as Maya returned to her daily routine, the work taking on new meaning as preparation for the challenges ahead. She was no longer just processing maintenance requests and inventory reports. She was learning the systems and procedures that kept military aircraft operational under the most demanding circumstances. Her colleagues noticed the change in her demeanor, the renewed energy that had replaced the quiet desperation of the previous months. Maya began volunteering for additional responsibilities, taking on projects that would expand her knowledge of aircraft systems and operational procedures. She studied maintenance manuals in her spare time, learning about the mechanical complexities that kept military aircraft flying in combat conditions. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. Maya Shen was no longer the defeated officer candidate who had been dismissed from flight training. She was becoming something else entirely, shaped by failure but not defined by it. The woman who would eventually fly the A-10 through ground fire was beginning to emerge, forged in the crucible of humiliation and tempered by the quiet determination to prove her worth on her own terms. The story of Maya's redemption was still months away, but the foundation was being laid through countless hours of preparation, study, and the gradual accumulation of experience that would eventually position her for a second chance. She had learned that success in military aviation required more than technical skill and academic achievement. It demanded the ability to persevere through adversity and find opportunity in the most unlikely circumstances. As the sun set over Randolph Air Force Base, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Maya sat in her small apartment reviewing technical manuals and planning her next steps. The path ahead was uncertain, but she was no longer walking it alone. She had found purpose in the possibility of redemption, and that purpose would sustain her through the challenges that lay ahead. The T-38s were still flying their evening sorties, their navigation lights blinking against the darkening sky. Maya watched them through her window, no longer seeing reminders of failure but glimpses of the future she was determined to reclaim. She had been told she wasn't good enough, that she lacked the qualities necessary for military aviation. Soon, she would have the opportunity to prove them wrong in the most dramatic way possible. But that story would have to wait for another day. Tonight, Maya had studying to do. 3 years had passed since Maya Chun's dismissal from advanced pilot training, and the sting of that failure had transformed into something harder and more useful. She had learned to channel disappointment into determination, converting every setback into preparation for opportunities that hadn't yet revealed themselves. The logistics office at Randolph had become her unlikely classroom, teaching her lessons about military aviation that no flight simulator could replicate. Maya's current assignment placed her deep within the maintenance ecosystem that kept the Air Force's aging A-10 fleet operational. She worked in the supply chain management office at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Arizona, where the desert heat shimmered off countless aircraft in various states of repair and retirement. The A-10 Thunderbolt II aircraft that surrounded her represented a different philosophy of military aviation, one that prioritized mission effectiveness over technological sophistication. The Thunderbolt was an ungainly aircraft by conventional standards, its twin engines mounted high on the fuselage and its massive GAU-8 cannon dominating the forward section, while her former classmates flew sleek fighters designed for speed and agility. The A-10 was built for survivability and precision in the most dangerous airspace imaginable. It was an aircraft that could absorb tremendous punishment and continue flying. Its redundant systems and armored cockpit designed to bring pilots home from missions that would destroy more fragile aircraft. Maya's supervisor, Lieutenant Colonel Sandra Reeves, had spent 15 years flying at tens before transitioning to a logistics role that utilized her operational experience to improve maintenance efficiency. Reeves understood the unique demands of close air support missions and the critical importance of keeping aircraft available for deployment. She had watched Maya's evolution from a bitter officer nursing wounded pride to a logistics specialist whose attention to detail bordered on obsession. "Chun, I need you to review the parts procurement forecast for the next fiscal year," Reeves said as she handed Maya a thick folder containing requisition data and usage projections. "The A-10 fleet is aging faster than anyone wants to admit, and we need to identify potential shortfalls before they ground aircraft." Maya accepted the assignment with the same methodical approach she applied to every task. She understood that her work directly impacted mission readiness, even if her contributions weren't visible to the pilots who depended on properly maintained aircraft. Over the months, she had developed an encyclopedic knowledge of A-10 systems, learning not just what parts were needed, but why they failed and how those failures affected aircraft performance. The parts forecast required Maya to analyze maintenance trends, predict component life cycles, and coordinate with manufacturers who supplied increasingly rare components for an aircraft that had been out of production for decades. She spent hours reviewing maintenance logs, identifying patterns in part failures and correlating them with mission profiles and environmental conditions. The work revealed the hidden complexities of military aviation, the intricate logistics networks that enabled combat operations thousands of miles from home bases. Maya learned about supply chains that stretched across continents, stockpiles of critical components maintained in climate-controlled warehouses, and the delicate balance between cost control and mission readiness that defined modern military procurement. Her analysis uncovered several concerning trends in A-10 maintenance data. Certain engine components were failing earlier than projected, creating potential shortages that could impact deployment schedules. Environmental sensors were degrading faster in desert conditions, requiring more frequent replacement than originally anticipated. Most critically, the aircraft's armor plating was showing stress fractures that suggested the fleet had been pushed harder than its designers had intended. Maya compiled her findings into a comprehensive report that combined statistical analysis with operational implications. She didn't just identify problems. She proposed solutions that balanced cost considerations with mission requirements. Her recommendations included revised procurement schedules, alternative suppliers for critical components, and modifications to maintenance procedures that could extend component life. The report earned recognition from senior leadership and established Maya as a subject matter expert on A-10 sustainment issues. More importantly, it brought her to the attention of officers who were looking for candidates with deep technical knowledge and operational understanding. The A-10 community was small and tight-knit, and word spread quickly about the logistics officer who understood their aircraft better than many pilots. Major Jessica Torres commanded the 74th Fighter Squadron, one of the last active A-10 units in the Air Force. Torres had flown combat missions over Afghanistan and Iraq, her aircraft returning from sorties with battle damage that would have been catastrophic in less robust airframes. She understood the critical relationship between maintenance support and mission success, and she had heard about Maya's work through the informal networks that connected A-10 operators across the service. "I have a proposition for you," Torres said when she appeared unexpectedly in Maya's office on a Tuesday morning in September. "My squadron is deploying to Kandahar next month, and I need a logistics officer who understands our mission requirements. Someone who can anticipate problems before they ground aircraft." Maya looked up from the computer screen where she had been tracking parts shipments, her expression cautious. "Ma'am, I'm honored by the offer, but I'm assigned to the supply chain management office here." "I've already talked to Colonel Reeves," Torres replied. "She thinks a deployment would be good for your professional development. The question is whether you're interested in supporting combat operations rather than just analyzing them from a distance." The opportunity represented a significant shift in Maya's career trajectory. Deployment to Afghanistan would place her in an operational environment where her decisions would have immediate consequences for mission success and pilot safety. It would also expose her to the realities of combat aviation that she had only studied through maintenance reports and after-action reviews. Maya had spent 3 years preparing for a moment like this, building expertise and credibility that would eventually lead to opportunities for greater responsibility. She understood that accepting the deployment would require her to prove herself in an environment where failure could mean the difference between life and death for the pilot she supported. "When do we leave?" Maya asked, her decision made before she fully understood its implications. The preparation for deployment consumed the next 3 weeks, with Maya attending briefings on threat conditions, rules of engagement, and the operational environment in Afghanistan. She learned about the Taliban's evolving tactics, the geography of Kandahar province, and the close air support missions that represented the A-10's primary role in the ongoing conflict. The briefings painted a picture of an aircraft perfectly suited to the requirements of counterinsurgency warfare. The A-10's low operating altitude allowed pilots to maintain visual contact with ground forces and accurately identify targets in complex urban environments. Its long loiter time enabled extended support for ground operations, while its heavy armor and redundant systems provided survivability in airspace, defended by small arms and man-portable air defense systems. Maya's role would involve managing the forward supply chain that kept aircraft operational, despite the challenges of operating from an austere base thousands of miles from major supply depots. She would coordinate parts shipments, manage local procurement of consumable supplies, and work with maintenance crews to prioritize repairs based on mission requirements and parts availability. The flight to Afghanistan marked Maya's first time leaving the continental United States, her transport aircraft following a route that took her through Germany and Qatar before arriving at Kandahar airfield. The base sprawled across the desert landscape like a temporary city, its runways and taxiways surrounded by a maze of concrete barriers, guard towers, and prefabricated buildings. The 74th Fighter Squadron operated from a section of the airfield designated for close air support operations. Their A-10s parked in hardened shelters that provided protection from indirect fire attacks. The aircraft showed the wear of continuous operations, their camouflage paint faded by sun and sandblasted by desert winds. Ground crews worked around the clock to maintain mission readiness, their efforts coordinated by a logistics system that Maya would soon help manage. Maya's quarters were located in a converted shipping container that had been modified with air conditioning, electrical systems, and basic furnishings. The space was cramped but functional, providing the privacy and security necessary for storing classified materials and conducting secure communications with supply sources around the world. Her first week at Kandahar was spent learning the rhythms of combat operations and understanding how logistics requirements changed in response to mission tempo and threat conditions. She observed the pre-flight briefings where pilots received their targeting assignments and weather updates, watched the controlled chaos of aircraft launch sequences, and monitored the radio communications that connected airborne aircraft with ground controllers and supported units. The A-10 pilots were a different breed from the fighter jocks she had encountered during her failed attempt at flight training. They were older, more focused on mission accomplishment than personal glory, and deeply committed to the close air support role that defined their professional identity. They spoke about their aircraft with the affection of mechanics rather than the swagger of race car drivers, appreciating the Thunderbolt's reliability and survivability over its modest performance. Specifications. Captain Mike Sullivan had been flying A-10s for 8 years, his experience spanning multiple deployments and hundreds of combat missions. He served as the squadron's weapons officer, responsible for training and tactics development, and he had quickly recognized Maya's technical expertise and operational understanding. Most logistics officers see us as just another customer requesting parts, Sullivan explained as he showed Maya around the maintenance hangar. But you understand that every component on this aircraft has a purpose, and that purpose is keeping pilots alive while they support troops in contact. Maya absorbed every detail of Sullivan's explanation, learning how combat operations differed from the training sorties she had observed at stateside bases. The aircraft returned from missions with evidence of their encounters with enemy forces, sand and dust clogged air filters, bullet holes in non-critical surfaces, and the accumulated stress of flying at low altitude through defended airspace. The maintenance crews worked with an urgency that reflected the operational tempo of sustained combat operations. Aircraft were turned around quickly, with minor damage repaired immediately and more significant problems addressed based on mission priority and parts availability. Maya's job was to ensure that critical components were available when needed, and that non-essential repairs didn't delay mission-critical aircraft. Her first major test came during the squadron's second week of operations, when an A-10 returned from a mission with significant damage to its left engine. Shrapnel from a rocket-propelled grenade had penetrated the engine nacelle, severing hydraulic lines and damaging turbine blades. The aircraft had made it back to base on backup systems, but the engine would require replacement before the aircraft could return to service. Replacing an A-10 engine in a combat environment required coordination between multiple supply chains, transportation networks, and maintenance specialties. Maya worked through the night to locate a serviceable engine at a depot in Qatar, arrange for its transportation to Kandahar, and coordinate with maintenance crews to prepare for the engine swap. The process revealed the hidden complexities of combat logistics, the countless decisions and coordination efforts required to keep a single aircraft operational. Maya had to balance the urgency of returning the aircraft to service against the safety requirements that governed engine installation procedures. She coordinated with quality assurance inspectors, supply chain managers, and transportation coordinators, each of whom had their own priorities and constraints. The engine arrived at Kandahar 36 hours after Maya had initiated the request. Transported by a cargo aircraft that had been diverted from its original mission to accommodate the priority shipment. The installation process took another 18 hours, with maintenance crews working in shifts to complete the complex procedure. Under field conditions, Maya monitored every step of the process, ensuring that required documentation was completed, that quality standards were maintained, and that the aircraft would be ready for its next mission as soon as possible. She learned to balance the competing demands of speed and safety, understanding that both were critical to mission success in a combat environment. The successful engine replacement earned Maya recognition from both the maintenance crews and the pilots who depended on aircraft availability. More importantly, it demonstrated her ability to manage complex logistics challenges under pressure, a skill that would become increasingly valuable as the deployment continued. The missions themselves followed a pattern that reflected the nature of counterinsurgency warfare in Afghanistan. A-10 pilots provided close air support for ground operations, responded to troops in contact situations, and conducted armed reconnaissance missions in areas where Taliban activity was suspected. The aircraft spent hours loitering over potential target areas, their pilots maintaining visual contact with ground forces and ready to engage threats as they emerged. Maya monitored these operations from the Squadron Operations Center, tracking aircraft status and coordinating with maintenance crews to ensure maximum availability for mission requirements. She learned to read the subtle indicators that suggested when aircraft might need attention, understanding how mission profiles affected system performance and component life. The work required her to think several steps ahead, anticipating maintenance requirements based on mission schedules and environmental conditions. She developed relationships with suppliers around the world, building networks that could respond quickly to urgent requirements. Most importantly, she learned to communicate effectively with pilots and maintenance crews, translating technical specifications into operational capabilities and mission impact. One afternoon in November, Major Torres approached Maya with a request that would fundamentally change her understanding of her role in the organization. The squadron had been tasked with supporting a complex ground operation that would require extended loiter time and precise coordination with multiple ground units. The mission profile would push aircraft to their operational limits, and Torres wanted Maya to accompany the mission planning process to provide real-time logistics input. "I need someone who understands our capabilities and limitations from a systems perspective," Torres explained. "Someone who can tell me whether what we're planning is sustainable from a maintenance and supply standpoint." Maya had never participated in mission planning at this level. Her previous experience limited to supporting decisions that had already been made by operational commanders. The opportunity to influence mission design based on logistics considerations represented a significant expansion of her responsibilities and authority. The planning process took place in a secure conference room where pilots, intelligence officers, and ground commanders coordinated the complex operation. Maya listened as they discussed target locations, threat assessments, and coordination procedures, gradually understanding how logistics constraints affected tactical options and operational effectiveness. Her contributions focused on aircraft availability, fuel requirements, and the sustainability of extended operations. She identified potential bottlenecks in the supply chain that could affect mission duration and proposed alternatives that would maximize operational flexibility. Her analysis revealed that the planned mission profile would exceed normal component replacement intervals, requiring accelerated maintenance schedules to maintain aircraft availability. The mission launched successfully with Maya monitoring aircraft status from the operations center and coordinating with maintenance crews to address any issues that arose during the extended operation. The A-10s performed exactly as planned, their pilots providing precise fire support for ground forces while maintaining station for nearly 8 hours of continuous operations. The success of the mission established Maya as an integral part of the squadron's planning process. Her technical expertise and operational understanding valued by both pilots and commanders. She had proven that logistics officers could contribute to mission success in ways that went beyond simply providing parts and supplies. As her deployment progressed, Maya began to understand the unique culture of the A-10 community and her potential place within it. The pilots and maintainers who kept the aging aircraft operational shared a deep appreciation for the aircraft's capabilities and a commitment to the close air support mission that defined their professional identity. They were pragmatists rather than romantics, focused on mission accomplishment rather than personal glory. Maya's technical background and operational experience made her a natural fit for this community, her contributions valued for their practical impact rather than their adherence to traditional career progression models. She had found a place where her skills were appreciated and her dedication recognized, even if that place wasn't in the cockpit of a high-performance fighter. The realization that she might have a future in military aviation, albeit in a different role than she had originally envisioned, came gradually through accumulated experiences and growing responsibilities. Maya began to see logistics not as a consolation prize for failed pilots, but as a critical enabler of operational success that required its own specialized expertise and professional dedication. The transformation was subtle but fundamental. Maya had arrived at Kandahar as a logistics officer seeking to prove her worth through technical competence and operational support. She was evolving into something more valuable, a bridge between the technical and operational communities whose understanding of both domains enabled her to optimize aircraft performance and mission effectiveness. Her deployment journal, which she maintained for personal reflection and professional development, documented this evolution through detailed observations about aircraft performance, maintenance trends, and operational lessons learned. The entries revealed a deepening understanding of military aviation that went beyond academic knowledge to encompass the practical realities of keeping aging aircraft operational in demanding environments. Maya's reputation within the A-10 community spread through the informal networks that connected operators across different bases and commands. Her name appeared in maintenance reports and operational assessments, always in the context of problem-solving and mission enablement. She was becoming known as someone who could find solutions to complex logistics challenges and translate operational requirements into sustainable support strategies. The recognition brought opportunities for increased responsibility and professional development. Maya was invited to participate in working groups focused on A-10 modernization and sustainment. Her input valued for its combination of technical depth and operational awareness. She contributed to studies analyzing the feasibility of extending the aircraft's service life and to planning efforts for future close air support requirements. More significantly, she began to receive informal inquiries about her interest in pursuing opportunities that would place her closer to operational flying. The A-10 community was always looking for qualified candidates who understood the aircraft's unique requirements and could contribute to its mission effectiveness. Maya's combination of technical expertise, operational experience, and demonstrated commitment to the community made her an attractive candidate for roles that bridged the gap between support and operations. The possibility of returning to flying status remained distant and uncertain, but it was no longer the impossible dream had seemed during her darkest moments at Randolph. Maya had built a foundation of credibility and expertise that could potentially support a second chance at aviation training, albeit through a different pathway than she had originally pursued. Her deployment to Afghanistan was scheduled to end in March, but Major Torres had already begun discussions about extending Maya's assignment or arranging for her transfer to another A-10 unit. The squadron had come to depend on her expertise, and the broader A-10 community was beginning to recognize her value as both a logistics specialist and an operational enabler. Maya's personal growth during the deployment extended beyond professional development to encompass a fundamental shift in her understanding of military service and personal purpose. She had learned that success in military aviation could take many forms, and that contribution to mission accomplishment was more important than adherence to traditional career models. The lessons she learned in Afghanistan would shape her approach to the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. She had proven herself capable of performing under pressure, solving complex problems, and contributing to mission success in ways that weren't captured by conventional performance metrics. Most importantly, she had demonstrated the persistence and adaptability that would be essential for the trials that awaited her. As winter deepened over Kandahar airfield, Maya continued her daily routine of coordinating supplies, monitoring aircraft status, and supporting the pilots who flew dangerous missions in support of ground forces. She had found purpose in work that others might consider mundane, understanding that her contributions enabled capabilities that could mean the difference between life and death for both aircrew and ground troops. The A-10s continued their missions, their distinctive sound becoming as familiar as her own heartbeat. Maya watched them launch and recover, their battle-scarred surfaces testament to the harsh realities of combat aviation. She had learned to read the subtle signs that indicated when aircraft needed attention, to anticipate problems before they became critical, and to find solutions to challenges that seemed impossible. Each successful mission validated her contributions and reinforced her commitment to the community that had welcomed her despite her non-traditional background. She was no longer the failed pilot candidate nursing wounded pride. She had become an integral part of an operational team whose mission she understood and whose success she enabled through her specialized expertise. The foundation was being laid for the next phase of Maya's journey, though she couldn't yet see its ultimate destination. She had built credibility, demonstrated competence, and earned the respect of a community that valued practical contribution over academic credentials. The skills and relationships she was developing would prove essential when opportunity finally presented itself in a form she had never expected. But that moment was still months away, hidden behind a sequence of events that would test everything. She had learned about persistence, preparation, and the true meaning of military service. For now, Maya was content to support the mission one aircraft at a time, one part at a time, one day at a time, building toward a future that remained uncertain, but no longer seemed impossible. The emergency began at 0347 local time when Captain Rodriguez's A-10 took a direct hit from a 23mm anti-aircraft gun positioned in the hills overlooking the Helmand River Valley. The rounds punched through the aircraft's left wing and severed hydraulic lines, sending pressurized fluid streaming into the slipstream as warning lights illuminated across his instrument panel. Rodriguez managed to maintain control long enough to egress the target area, but his aircraft was hemorrhaging fluid and losing system functionality with each passing minute. Maya Shun was monitoring the overnight operations from the squadron's logistics coordination center when the distress call crackled through the radio speakers. She had been tracking the mission since its launch 6 hours earlier, a complex close air support operation supporting Marines who had encountered unexpected resistance during a patrol through a Taliban stronghold. The mission had already been extended twice as ground commanders requested additional air support to extract their forces from an increasingly dangerous situation. Hog 27, declaring emergency. Rodriguez's voice carried the controlled tension of a pilot dealing with multiple system failures. I've got hydraulic failures, flight control degradation, and unknown structural damage to the left wing. Request immediate vectors to the nearest suitable airfield. The air traffic controller's response came immediately, but the options were limited by both distance and weather conditions. Kandahar Airfield was 200 miles southeast, well beyond the range of an aircraft that was losing hydraulic pressure and struggling to maintain controlled flight. Bagram Air Base was closer but lay across mountainous terrain that would be impossible to navigate with degraded flight controls. Maya listened to the exchange while simultaneously pulling up technical manuals and emergency procedures on her computer terminal. The A-10's emergency systems were designed to handle multiple failures, but the combination of hydraulic loss and structural damage presented challenges that would test both the aircraft's redundancy and the pilot's skill. She began calculating fuel consumption rates, emergency landing distances, and backup system capabilities, preparing information that might prove critical to Rodriguez's survival. The nearest airfield capable of handling an emergency landing was Shindand Air Base, an Afghan military installation that had been recently upgraded with coalition support, but lacked the specialized maintenance facilities needed to repair an A-10. The runway was long enough and the weather conditions were acceptable, but landing at Shindand would effectively strand the aircraft until a recovery team could be assembled and transported from Kandahar. Major Torres appeared at Maya's workstation as the emergency developed, her expression grim as she monitored the radio traffic and assessed the squadron's options. "What do you think about his chances of making it to Shindand?" she asked, her voice low enough to avoid interfering with the air traffic control coordination taking place across the room. Maya reviewed the data on her screen before responding. The hydraulic system is designed to handle single-point failures, but he's lost pressure in 2 independent circuits. The manual reversion capability should give him basic flight control, but landing is going to be extremely challenging. He'll have no wheel brakes, no steering authority, and limited flap extension. The situation was complicated by the ongoing ground operation that had originally prompted Rodriguez's mission. The Marines were still in contact with Taliban forces and required continuous air support to maintain their defensive positions and coordinate their withdrawal. Rodriguez's wingman, Captain Kelly, was providing that support, but a single A-10 couldn't maintain the coverage needed for an extended ground operation. Torres faced a decision that embodied the competing priorities of combat aviation. She could recall Kelly to escort Rodriguez to Shindand, ensuring that the damaged aircraft had assistance during its emergency approach, but leaving the Marines without air support. Alternatively, she could direct Rodriguez to attempt the emergency landing alone while Kelly continued supporting the ground operation, maximizing mission effectiveness, but increasing the risk to the pilot dealing with multiple aircraft emergencies. The decision was complicated by weather forecasts that showed deteriorating conditions along the route to Shindand. Dust storms were developing across the region, reducing visibility and creating turbulence that would make flying difficult even for aircraft with full system functionality. Rodriguez would be attempting an emergency approach in an aircraft with degraded capabilities through weather conditions that challenged even experienced pilots in fully operational jets. Maya's radio crackled as the air traffic controller coordinated with Rodriguez to establish his position and begin vectoring him towards Shindand. The pilot's voice remained calm and professional, but the background noise in his transmissions revealed the increasing vibration and instability affecting his aircraft. Each radio call seemed to take more effort, suggesting that his flight control situation was continuing to deteriorate. Hog 27, I'm showing increasing control difficulties, Rodriguez reported. The aircraft wants to roll left and I'm having to fight it with constant right aileron input. I don't think I can maintain this for 2 hours. The admission changed the dynamics of the emergency, introducing time pressure that complicated every aspect of the rescue coordination. Rodriguez needed to land soon, but the nearest suitable airfield was still more than an hour away under ideal conditions. His aircraft was becoming more difficult to control, and there was no guarantee that the damaged systems would continue functioning long enough to reach Shindand. Torres made her decision with the certainty of someone who had faced similar choices. Throughout her combat career, Kelly continues supporting the ground operation. Will coordinate emergency services at Shindand to meet Rodriguez when he arrives. Maya understood the logic behind Torres's decision, but she also recognized that they were essentially gambling with Rodriguez's life based on his aircraft's ability to continue flying despite multiple system failures. She began coordinating with emergency response teams at Shindand, ensuring that crash and rescue equipment would be positioned to respond immediately when Rodriguez attempted his landing. The coordination process revealed the limitations of operating from austere bases. In a combat environment, Shindand's emergency response capabilities were basic compared to those available at major airfields, with limited firefighting equipment and no specialized rescue personnel trained to deal with 10 emergencies. Maya worked through established protocols to arrange for a medical helicopter to be positioned at the airfield, but its arrival would depend on weather conditions and the availability of aircraft from other ongoing operations. As Rodriguez struggled to maintain control of his damaged aircraft, Maya found herself drawn into the technical aspects of his emergency. She consulted with A-10 maintenance experts via secure communications, discussing possible failure modes and emergency procedures that might help the pilot maintain control during his approach. The conversations revealed the complexity of the aircraft systems and the multiple redundancies that had kept Rodriguez flying despite catastrophic damage. The A-10's manual reversion system allowed pilots to maintain basic flight control even after complete hydraulic failure, but the system required significantly more physical effort and provided reduced control authority. Rodriguez would need to carefully manage his airspeed and approach angle to ensure that he could flare for landing without losing control, a delicate balance that would be complicated by the structural damage affecting his aircraft's flight characteristics. Maya's analysis of the emergency procedures revealed several critical factors that would influence Rodriguez's chances of survival. The A-10's landing gear could be extended using backup systems, but the pilot would have no ability to retract the gear if conditions required a go-around. The aircraft's speed brakes were hydraulically operated and might not function, limiting Rodriguez's ability to manage his approach speed. Most critically, the nose wheel steering would be inoperative, meaning that any landing would likely result in the aircraft departing the runway unless the approach was perfectly aligned. The weather situation continued to deteriorate as Rodriguez flew toward Shindand, with dust storms reducing visibility to less than 2 miles and creating turbulence that buffeted his damaged aircraft. Maya monitored weather reports from stations throughout the region, looking for any indication that conditions might improve before Rodriguez's arrival. The forecasts were uniformly pessimistic, suggesting that the dust storm would intensify over the next several hours. Maya's role in the emergency response expanded as she became the primary coordinator between the aircraft in distress and the various support agencies attempting to assist with the landing. She relayed technical information about A-10 emergency procedures to the crash rescue teams at Shindand, coordinated with medical personnel to ensure they understood the potential injuries that might result from a hard landing, and maintained communication with Rodriguez to provide updates on weather conditions and emergency response preparations. The pilot's radio calls became increasingly strained as he approached Shindand, his voice reflecting the physical effort required to maintain control of his aircraft. "I'm getting significant buffeting from the left wing," he reported. "I think I may have lost some structural integrity, and the aircraft is becoming harder to control as my fuel load decreases." Maya consulted her technical references and realized that Rodriguez's observation about fuel load was particularly concerning. A-10s were designed with fuel tanks distributed throughout the aircraft to maintain proper center of gravity as fuel was consumed. Structural damage to the left wing might have compromised fuel flow from that section of the aircraft, creating an imbalance that would become more pronounced as the overall fuel load decreased. The implications were serious. Rodriguez would need to land soon, not just because of his hydraulic failures, but because his aircraft's handling characteristics were changing as fuel was consumed unevenly. Maya calculated that he had perhaps 30 minutes before the center of gravity shift would make the aircraft uncontrollable. Assuming that her analysis of the fuel system damage was correct, she relayed her concerns to Torres, who immediately contacted Rodriguez to advise him of the potential fuel imbalance issue. The pilot acknowledged the information and reported that he was indeed experiencing increasing difficulty maintaining lateral control. The aircraft's tendency to roll left was becoming more pronounced, requiring constant control input that was exhausting his physical strength. "Hog 27, recommend you begin your approach immediately," Torres advised. "Weather conditions are marginal, but within limits, and delaying further may compromise your control authority." Rodriguez acknowledged the instruction and began coordinating with Shindand Tower to establish his approach. The air traffic controllers at the Afghan base had been briefed on the emergency and had positioned their limited equipment to provide maximum assistance. The runway had been cleared of all other traffic, emergency vehicles were standing by, and medical personnel were prepared to respond immediately after landing. Maya monitored the approach through radio communications and radar tracking, her attention focused on every detail that might affect the outcome. Rodriguez's airspeed was slightly higher than normal for an A-10 approach, but that was expected given his limited control authority and the need to maintain adequate energy to flare for landing. His descent rate appeared stable, though she knew that small variations might not be apparent through the radar system's limited resolution. The critical moment came as Rodriguez entered the final approach phase, his aircraft descending through increasingly turbulent air toward the runway at Shindand. Dust from the ongoing storm reduced visibility to the point where the pilot would have only seconds to visually acquire the runway before beginning his flare for landing. Maya listened to his radio calls, hearing the strain in his voice as he fought to maintain control through the difficult approach. "Tower, I have the runway in sight," Rodriguez reported, his transmission punctuated by static and background noise that suggested his aircraft's electrical systems were also being affected by the accumulated damage. "Beginning final approach. Emergency equipment. Be advised I will have no steering control after touchdown." The landing itself was a masterpiece of pilot skill and aircraft design working together to overcome impossible circumstances. Rodriguez touched down hard, but within the runway's dimensional limits, his aircraft bouncing once before settling onto the pavement with a screech of tires and the distinctive whine of an A-10's engine spooling down. The aircraft rolled straight for approximately 1,000 feet before veering left as the pilot lost directional control. But the departure from the runway was gradual enough to avoid a catastrophic crash. Maya felt a wave of relief as Rodriguez's voice came through the radio, calm and professional, despite having just survived what could easily have been a fatal emergency. "Tower, Hog 27 is down and stopped, pilot uninjured. Emergency equipment can approach when ready." The successful emergency landing represented a triumph of preparation, skill, and the robust design characteristics that made the A-10 uniquely capable of surviving battle damage. But it also created a new set of challenges for Maya and the logistics team responsible for recovering the damaged aircraft and returning it to service. Rodriguez's A-10 was stranded at Shindand with battle damage that would require extensive repair before it could return to flight status. The structural damage to the left wing would need assessment by qualified technicians. The hydraulic systems would require complete replacement, and the aircraft's electrical systems would need testing to determine the extent of damage from the emergency landing. Maya began coordinating the logistics effort that would be required to either repair the aircraft in place or transport it to a facility capable of handling major structural work. The recovery operation would require specialists, equipment, and parts that weren't readily available at forward operating bases. Maya spent hours coordinating with maintenance depots, transportation commands, and logistics networks to assemble the resources needed to assess and repair Rodriguez's aircraft. The effort involved personnel from multiple services and allied nations, each contributing expertise and capabilities to the complex undertaking. While Maya coordinated the recovery effort, the tactical situation that had prompted Rodriguez's original mission continued to evolve. The Marines he had been supporting successfully withdrew from their contact with Taliban forces, but intelligence reports suggested that enemy activity in the region was increasing. Additional close air support missions would be required, but the squadron's aircraft availability had been reduced by Rodriguez's emergency landing. Major Torres faced pressure from higher headquarters to maintain mission capability despite the loss of one aircraft to battle damage. The A-10 community was small, and every aircraft represented significant capability that couldn't easily be replaced. Maya's role in maintaining aircraft availability became even more critical as the squadron prepared for potential surge operations in response to increased enemy activity. The assessment of Rodriguez's aircraft revealed damage that was more extensive than initially apparent. The 23mm rounds had not only severed hydraulic lines, but had also damaged structural elements of the left wing that would require replacement rather than repair. Maya coordinated with engineering teams to determine whether the repairs could be accomplished at Shindand, or whether the aircraft would need to be transported to a depot-level maintenance facility. The decision ultimately depended on factors that Maya was uniquely qualified to evaluate. She understood the technical requirements for a 1-0 structural repairs, the capabilities of various maintenance facilities, and the logistics networks that could support different repair strategies. Her recommendation would influence not only the timeline for returning Rodriguez's aircraft to service, but also the allocation of resources that might be needed for other maintenance priorities. Maya's analysis concluded that attempting repairs at Shindand would be both time-consuming and resource-intensive, requiring specialized personnel and equipment that would be better utilized at established maintenance facilities. She recommended that the aircraft be prepared for transport to Bagram Air Base, where depot-level maintenance capabilities could address the structural damage more efficiently. The recommendation was accepted by Torres and endorsed by higher headquarters, but implementing the transport plan required Maya to coordinate with airlift assets that were in high demand throughout the theater of operations. She worked through Military Airlift Command to identify cargo aircraft capable of transporting an A-10, arranged for the specialized equipment needed to load and secure the aircraft for transport, and coordinated with receiving agencies at Bagram to ensure they were prepared for the incoming damaged aircraft. The transport operation took place over 3 days, with Maya monitoring every aspect of the complex logistics effort. The damaged A-10 was carefully prepared for transport, its weapons and hazardous materials removed, its fuel systems purged, and its structure secured to prevent further damage during movement. The loading process required precision timing and specialized equipment, with Maya serving as the primary coordinator between the various agencies involved in the operation. Rodriguez's successful emergency landing and the subsequent recovery operation established Maya as a crisis management specialist within the A-10 community. Her technical knowledge, coordination skills, and ability to work effectively under pressure had been demonstrated in an operational environment where failure could have resulted in the loss of both an aircraft and a pilot. The recognition opened new opportunities for professional development and increased responsibility. Major Torres began including Maya in planning discussions for complex operations, recognizing that her understanding of aircraft capabilities and limitations could influence mission design and execution. Maya's input helped optimize mission profiles to balance operational effectiveness with maintainability, ensuring that aircraft could sustain high operational tempos without compromising safety or mission readiness. The experience also highlighted the unique value that Maya brought to the A-10 community through her combination of technical expertise and operational awareness. She understood both the capabilities of the aircraft and the requirements of the missions they supported, enabling her to make recommendations that balanced competing priorities and optimized overall effectiveness. As her deployment continued, Maya became increasingly involved in the squadron's operational planning and execution. Her role evolved from providing logistics support to serving as a technical advisor, whose input influenced everything from mission profile design to aircraft configuration decisions. The transition reflected both her growing expertise and the recognition that modern military operations required personnel who could bridge the gap between technical specialties and operational requirements. The success of Rodriguez's emergency response also brought Maya to the attention of senior leaders within the broader A-10 community. Her name appeared in operational reports and lessons learned documents, always in the context of effective crisis management and technical problem solving. The recognition would prove important when opportunities for career advancement became available, But Maya remained focused on supporting the daily operations that kept aircraft flying and missions successful. Her personal journal entries during this period reflected a growing confidence in her abilities and a clearer understanding of her potential contributions to military aviation. She had proven herself capable of performing under extreme pressure, managing complex logistics challenges, and supporting life-or-death decisions that affected both aircrew and ground forces. The experience had validated her technical knowledge and demonstrated her value to the operational community. Maya's reputation within the ATEN community continued to grow as word of her contributions spread through the informal networks that connected operators across different bases and commands. She received inquiries about her background, her interests, and her career goals from officers who were impressed by her combination of technical expertise and operational understanding. The inquiries eventually led to conversations about opportunities that would place Maya closer to operational flying, though the specifics remained vague and the timelines uncertain. The ATEN community was always looking for qualified personnel who understood the aircraft's unique requirements and could contribute to its mission effectiveness. Maya's proven capabilities made her an attractive candidate for roles that might eventually lead back to flying status. But those opportunities remained in the future, dependent on policy changes, training slot availability, and Maya's continued development of the skills and experience that would qualify her for advanced responsibilities. For now, she was content to support the mission one crisis at a time, building the expertise and credibility that would position her for whatever opportunities might emerge. The successful resolution of Rodriguez's emergency had demonstrated Maya's value to the ATEN community in concrete terms. She had helped save both an aircraft and a pilot through her technical knowledge, coordination skills, and ability to perform under pressure. The experience had also revealed her potential for greater responsibilities and contributions to operational effectiveness. As the dust settled over Shindand Air Base and Rodriguez's aircraft began its journey to Bagram for repairs, Maya returned to her normal routine of supporting daily operations and maintaining aircraft readiness. But something had changed in how others viewed her capabilities and potential. She was no longer just a logistics officer with technical expertise. She had become a problem solver whose contributions could mean the difference between mission success and failure. The foundation was now in place for the next phase of Maya's journey, though she couldn't yet see its ultimate destination. She had built credibility through performance, demonstrated value through crisis management, and earned the respect of a community that measured worth through contribution to the mission. The skills and relationships she had developed would prove essential when opportunity finally presented itself in a form she had never expected. The stage was set for Maya's ultimate test, a moment when all of her preparation, experience, and determination would converge in circumstances that would demand everything she had learned about flying, fighting, and survival. But that moment was still weeks away, hidden behind a sequence of events that would challenge not only Maya's abilities, but her fundamental understanding of what it meant to serve others at the cost of personal safety. The attack on Forward Operating Base Chapman came without warning at 0520 hours on a December morning, when most of the base was still shrouded in pre-dawn darkness. Maya Shun was reviewing maintenance schedules when the first mortar rounds impacted. Near the fuel storage area, their explosions shattering the routine calm that had settled over the small outpost. Within minutes, the base was under coordinated assault from multiple directions, with Taliban forces launching a complex attack designed to overrun the facility and capture high-value equipment. The base commander, Colonel Williams, faced an impossible situation. Chapman was defended by fewer than 200 personnel against an estimated 400 attackers, who had positioned themselves in the surrounding hills with heavy weapons and anti-aircraft systems. The morning's scheduled 10 missions had been canceled due to maintenance issues, leaving only one aircraft available for immediate launch. Captain Sullivan was prepared to fly, but intelligence reports indicated that the Taliban had deployed multiple surface-to-air missile systems specifically to counter any air support response. Maya found herself in the operations center as the attack intensified, her logistics expertise suddenly relevant to immediate survival rather than long-term planning. The base's defensive systems were being overwhelmed and casualties were mounting. As Taliban fighters advanced through predetermined attack corridors, Colonel Williams needed immediate close air support, but launching a single A-10 against coordinated air defenses would likely result in the loss of both aircraft and pilot. "We need someone in the air now," Williams declared as he surveyed the tactical display showing enemy positions. "But Sullivan's our only experienced pilot available, and we can't afford to lose him." Maya had been listening to the tactical radio networks, monitoring the desperate calls for air support from defensive positions around the base perimeter. The Taliban attack was succeeding because they had achieved local superiority in numbers and firepower, advantages that could only be countered by precision airstrikes, delivered by someone willing to fly through intense ground fire. The words came out before Maya fully realized their implications. "Sir, I can fly the mission." The operations center fell silent except for the distant sound of explosions and automatic weapons fire. Every officer present understood that Maya was a logistics specialist with no recent flight experience, let alone combat training in the A-10. Her offer seemed born of desperation, rather than rational assessment of capabilities and risks. Colonel Williams studied Maya's face, searching for any indication that her statement represented something other than a death wish motivated by the chaos of combat. "Chun, you're not current in the aircraft. You haven't flown in a A-10, and you've never flown combat missions." Maya's response was calm despite the circumstances. "Sir, I've spent 4 years studying every system on that aircraft. I know its capabilities, its limitations, and its emergency procedures better than most pilots. I understand the tactical situation, and I know what needs to be done." Major Torres appeared beside them, her expression grim as she absorbed what Maya was proposing. "It's suicide," she said bluntly. "The Taliban have set up a perfect trap. They're expecting air support, and they're ready for it." Maya nodded acknowledgement of the assessment while continuing to study the tactical display. The enemy positions were well coordinated and positioned to provide mutual support against air attack. Multiple anti-aircraft systems were positioned to create overlapping fields of fire that would challenge even experienced combat pilots. But the defensive positions also revealed vulnerabilities that could be exploited by someone willing to accept extreme risk. "They're expecting conventional attack profiles," Maya observed. "High-speed passes from medium altitude with standard weapons delivery parameters, but the A-10 can operate differently. Low altitude, slow speed, extended engagement times. I can get underneath their engagement envelope and stay there long enough to break up their attack." The tactical concept was sound, but required execution skills that Maya had never demonstrated in actual flight operations. She would need to fly the A-10 at minimum altitude through intense ground fire, identify and engage multiple targets while maintaining aircraft control, and do so without the benefit of recent flight training or combat experience. Colonel Williams weighed the alternatives available to him. Conventional ground defense was failing, and the base would likely be overrun within hours without effective air support. Sullivan could attempt the mission, but his survival would depend on tactics that hadn't been tested against the specific threat array the Taliban had deployed. Maya's proposal offered a different approach, though one that relied on theoretical knowledge rather than practical experience. The decision came down to a calculated gamble with lives and equipment that couldn't be easily replaced. Williams authorized Maya to attempt the mission, understanding that her survival was unlikely, but that her success might save the lives of everyone defending the base. Maya's preparation for the mission was necessarily brief, limited to a rapid Review of aircraft systems and weapons configurations. She hadn't flown any aircraft in over 4 years, let alone the complex systems of a combat-loaded A-10. Her knowledge was theoretical rather than practical, based on maintenance manuals and technical documentation rather than flight experience. The aircraft waiting on the flight line was fully loaded with a mixed ordnance configuration designed for close air support operations. The GAU-8 cannon contained its full load of 30 mm ammunition, while external pylons carried Maverick missiles, general-purpose bombs, and marking rockets. Maya would have more firepower than any single pilot could realistically employ, but managing that capability would require skills she had never practiced. Her pre-flight inspection was methodical and thorough, drawing on years of maintenance experience to identify potential problems that might compromise mission success. She checked fluid levels, verified ordnance configurations, and tested flight control systems with the precision of someone who understood the consequences of mechanical failure in combat. The engine start sequence proceeded normally, with Maya following checklists she had memorized through repeated study but never actually used. The I-10 systems came online exactly as the technical manuals had described, each indicator light and gauge reading confirming that the aircraft was ready for operations despite the unconventional circumstances of its pilot. Maya's taxi to the runway felt surreal, her hands on controls she had studied but never operated in flight. The A-10 responded to her inputs with the predictable characteristics described in performance manuals. But the reality of controlling 11 tons of aircraft and ordnance was different from theoretical knowledge. She completed her final checks and requested takeoff clearance, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was attempting. The takeoff was smooth, with Maya managing power settings and control inputs based on calculated performance rather than experience. The A-10 lifted off exactly as predicted, its climb rate and handling characteristics matching the specifications she had memorized. But flying the aircraft was only the beginning of challenges that would test every aspect of her preparation and determination. The Taliban positions became visible as Maya approached the base perimeter, their muzzle flashes and smoke signatures revealing the intensity of the ongoing ground battle. Enemy forces had positioned themselves in terrain that provided both cover from ground-based defensive fire and clear fields of fire against conventional air attack corridors. Maya could see the logic of their tactical deployment and understood why previous air support requests had been unsuccessful. Her first attack run targeted an anti-aircraft position that was directing fire at the base's defensive positions. Maya descended to an altitude that placed her well below the engagement envelope of shoulder-fired missiles, but directly in the path of small arms and automatic weapons fire. The A-10 shuddered as bullets struck its armored surfaces, but the aircraft's design absorbed the punishment without compromising flight controls or critical systems. Maya's weapons delivery was precise despite her lack of combat experience. Her technical understanding of ballistics and target engagement, translating into effective employment of the aircraft's capabilities. The GAU-8 cannon functioned exactly as specifications had indicated, its 30 mm rounds destroying the targeted anti-aircraft position and eliminating a significant threat to base defensive operations. The success of her first attack encouraged Maya to continue the mission despite the intensity of ground fire she was receiving. She identified additional target sets and began planning attack sequences that would maximize damage to enemy positions, while minimizing her exposure to defensive fire. The process required split-second decision-making and precise aircraft control, skills she was developing in real time under the most demanding circumstances possible. Her second attack targeted a mortar position that had been directing indirect fire into the base perimeter. Maya approached from an unexpected direction, using terrain masking to avoid detection until she was within effective range of her cannon. The attack was successful, but the low-altitude approach placed her aircraft directly over concentrations of enemy small arms that filled the air around her with tracer rounds and explosions. The A-10 continued to absorb punishment that would have destroyed less robust aircraft, but Maya could feel the accumulated damage affecting flight characteristics and system performance. Warning lights illuminated on her instrument panel, indicating damage to hydraulic systems and flight controls that would make subsequent attacks increasingly dangerous. Maya continued the mission despite growing system failures and the certainty that her aircraft was sustaining damage that might prevent her return to base. She attacked enemy positions with methodical precision, using her weapon systems knowledge to maximize effectiveness while managing the degrading performance of her aircraft. Each attack run required greater skill and determination as control became more difficult and system failures accumulated. The Taliban assault began to falter as Maya's bias attacks disrupted their coordinated advance and eliminated key weapons positions. Enemy forces found themselves exposed to effective fire from base defensive positions, while losing the supporting fires that had enabled their initial success. The complex attack that had threatened to overrun the base was degenerating into a series of isolated engagements that favored the defenders. Maya's final attack targeted the command element that was coordinating the enemy assault, a group of Taliban leaders positioned in terrain that provided observation of the entire battlefield. The approach required her to fly through the most intense concentration of defensive fire she had yet encountered, but eliminating the command structure would effectively end the coordinated threat to the base. The attack was successful, but the concentrated defensive fire finally achieved what individual weapons had been unable to accomplish. Multiple rounds penetrated critical systems simultaneously, causing failures that compromised Maya's ability to maintain controlled flight. The A-10 was still flyable, but barely, and Maya faced the challenge of returning to base in an aircraft that was rapidly losing essential capabilities. Her return flight was a masterpiece of emergency procedures and aircraft systems knowledge applied under impossible circumstances. Maya managed multiple system failures while maintaining enough control authority to reach the base runway, drawing on her theoretical understanding of emergency procedures that she had never practiced in actual flight operations. The landing was more controlled crash than routine arrival, with Maya touching down hard and departing the runway as damaged systems failed completely. But she had survived, and more importantly, she had accomplished the mission that saved forward operating base Chapman from being overrun by a superior enemy force. The aftermath of the mission brought recognition that Maya had never sought, and opportunities she had never imagined possible. Her flight through intense ground fire to break up the Taliban assault became legendary within the A-10 community, proof that technical knowledge and determination could overcome the lack of conventional flight experience. When lives were at stake, Maya Chun had proven that the judgments made about her capabilities during flight training had been fundamentally wrong. She possessed the skills and courage necessary for military aviation, but expressed through unconventional pathways that traditional evaluation methods had failed to recognize. Her success opened doors not just for her own career, but for others who might contribute to military aviation in ways that didn't conform to established patterns. The woman who had been dismissed from flight training for lacking fighter pilot characteristics had saved an entire base by flying the A-10 exactly as it was designed to be flown. Her technical understanding, tactical awareness, and willingness to accept extreme risk had combined to create capabilities that exceeded those of pilots with conventional training and experience. Maya's story became part of A-10 lore, told and retold throughout the community as an example of what was possible when someone truly understood the aircraft and its mission. She had flown through ground fire not because she was reckless, but because she understood better than most what the A-10 could endure and what needed to be accomplished to save lives. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.